The higher your VO2 max, the less likely you're going to die or die early. So VO2 max is one of the best predictors of all-cause mortality, your likelihood of dying.
Why aren't more people talking about this?
I think it's getting more popular.
Well, and the test for VO2 max is so unpleasant.
It absolutely is a sort of peak output measurement.
Why should women in midlife, regardless of their fitness goals, care about VO2 max?
Oh, wow. So that's a great question. The first thing that popped into my mind would be...
Dani King is the Director of Performance and Recovery at Lifetime. With over 20 years in the fitness industry, Dani has spent the last 8 years shaping the next generation of coaches and helping teams unlock their highest potential. What makes his story unique is his passion for showing everyday people, not just athletes, the true power of fitness and wellness to transform lives and create lasting impact.
Your HIIT training can increase the cortisol levels.
I'm going to throw out a statement of, cortisol matters. But I actually think it's incredibly overstated in the concerns for most people.
So then it's like, well, how much high intensity training do you need to move the needle on your VO2 max?
So for most people, practically that translates to 1 to 2 fairly high intensity workouts.
You said recovery. How important is it?
Yeah, it's very important. And the interesting thing is,
get ready to feel amazing this fall. Our 7-day Vitality Reboot kicks off September 14th, and you don't want to miss it. This isn't your average detox. It's a total mind-body reset that leaves you feeling light, energized, sleeping better, and ready to crush your goals. The best part, you won't be doing this alone. You'll be surrounded by our incredible, supportive community of women who are all working toward the same thing, feeling their absolute best. Together, we'll share tips, celebrate wins, and keep each other motivated every single day. Fall is the perfect time to reset before the holiday chaos hits. Head to the link in our show notes to grab your spot for our Fall Vitality 7-day reboot. Trust us, you'll thank yourself for saying yes to this reset. Welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast, where we empower you to take charge of your health and happiness. We're Marnie
and Stephanie,
board-certified integrative health practitioners, holistic wellness coaches, and passionate explorers of all things mind, body, and soul.
Each week, we bring you expert insights, real-life stories, and practical tools to help you bridge the gap between where you are now and where you truly want to be. From longevity and nutrition to mindset, movement, and healing, we dive deep to uncover the root causes of wellness and vitality.
Join us and our growing community as we explore what it really means to create your art of living well in a way that's authentic, sustainable, and uniquely yours.
Hi, Dani. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. Marnie and I have been diving into VO2 max and zone training for over a year now, ever since we completed our first endurance event last fall, and we've been wanting to have someone come on. And so we were so excited when Jamie connected us, and we're just really excited to share this topic with our listeners because we really haven't talked about it too much aside from our experience.
yeah, thank you for having me. Really excited to talk.
Yeah, well, we've been so dialed into longevity for the last few years, and I don't think I appreciated maybe up until a year ago, how much that the VO2 max and zone training can really improve longevity. It's not just about if you're an athlete or you want to improve your endurance, performance, or anything like that. So there's just such broad implications that this topic has. And so listeners out there, just encourage you, if you are at all focused on longevity or your heart health and improving your endurance, this episode is for you. So before we get started, we have one fun question to ask you. If you could master any skill, doesn't need to be wellness or fitness related at all, what would it be?
The first thing that popped into my mind, I think I go with this, would be some sort of instrument. I'm thinking like a piano or something of that nature. I have no musical talent. I can't clap on a beat. I'm tone deaf. So I'm extra jealous of those things.
Can you work out to music?
No, absolutely not.
Really? Okay.
No, I don't get the idea of like beats per minute and how that would affect. I have no talent here. But I just think about the idea of, you see a piano somewhere and like sit down and just start going, right? And like random strangers, that to me would be really fun. And I'd like
There's
to do
one
it.
right there.
Yes. See, I'm jealous.
Yeah, it's an antique and my kids play. I used to play when I was younger, but I'm not like great. Every once in a while, I think that's something I should start doing again, though. But anyway,
I think that's what I'd go with.
As we start to dive into VO2 max, we would love for you to actually define what is VO2 max, because I don't know that everybody necessarily knows what that is. And, why should women in midlife, regardless of their fitness goals, care about VO2 max?
Absolutely. So VO2 max, the actual definition, if we go, it's the maximum volume of oxygen that your body can intake during exercise. So VO2 max volume, it is measured. If you look at how it's measured, when you see something like a VO2 max, it's volume of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. And I say that because there is a body weight factor into something like VO2 max, right? Now that's not to say if you're smaller, it'll be better. If you're larger, it'll be different. It's just a larger human. So if I take a, 6'2", 200-pound male and a 5'4", 130-pound female, right? They are naturally going to consume different amounts of oxygen. So it's equalized for size. And it is generally considered one of, if not the best predictors of overall cardiovascular fitness or cardiovascular ability.
If a woman is not focused on her cardiovascular ability, it's still important, right? And why?
I said cardiovascular ability, but it is largely also considered one of the best predictors of all-cause mortality. So all-cause mortality, your likelihood of dying. And when they factor VO2 max, and they look across all different things, right? Equalizing for size, shape, gender, all these things, inclusive of activities like smoking, diet, things that we traditionally really cause, it is one of the best predictors, meaning the higher your VO2 max, the less likely you're going to die or die early, right? So there is this massive, massive longevity plug to VO2 max.
it's like, why aren't more people talking about this? Is what first comes to mind.
I think it's getting more popular, right? Like you are starting to hear about it a little bit more. In the fitness space, I think there's ebbs and flows of what's popular, right? When you look at, aerobic activity and strength training has been getting all the rage the last couple of years, which I love. I'm an absolute meathead at heart. I love strength training. I think everyone should be doing it. I'm passionate. But in that sometimes the distraction comes away. And I think one of the things that fell away was this focus on cardiovascular exercise and the impact that can have and how that could impact longevity. And now we're starting to see that pendulum come back. And my hope is that somehow we end up in a place where that pendulum is a little more equal, right? As it being like, I got to do a little bit of all of this stuff.
Well, and the test for VO2 max is so unpleasant. I mean, it's just awful. I do not like it.
Well, it's funny. The other day I was cleaning out my cubby and I found the first time I did it at Lifetime, it was 10 plus years ago. And I have that mask that you kind of purchase, kept it because in theory I want to do it again to see my improvement. And I just did not like it enough. And I still have the mask. I'm like, do I get rid of it or not?
I didn't get a mask. I didn't do it.
I have some contraption that they gave me to keep.
Neoprene masks.
Yes, that's what I have.
We've been doing, it's funny because this has gotten more popular and these things come out at Lifetime. I got certified to deliver VO2 max testing in 2006, right? So this stuff isn't new. In fact, one of the reasons that it's so useful in measuring things like longevity and studies is that we've been able to test it since the 70s. So there's robust amounts of data across so many different groups, right? I will just put small Lifetime plug. We are in process of switching out our analyte. We're updating a bunch of technology and we're moving to a much more comfortable mask. It's rubber. It's away from the face a little bit more. It's not amazing, right? I'm not putting this thing on to exercise normally, but as a person who hated the really tight neoprene mask and struggled, the new ones are going to be much better.
Well, and it's also just a hard test, right? Because you're going to your max. And then to be trying to breathe with the mask on your face, and it's a whole thing.
It absolutely is a sort of peak output measurement, right? VO2 is going to climb. So the harder I exercise, right? Just getting to the harder I exercise, the more oxygen I have to consume to power my body. In order to actually test it, there's a lot of ways you can predict it, right? If you're wearing a smartwatch, it probably predicts it. There's some actual tests out there that can predict with relatively decent accuracy. But if you really want to do it, all of them are going to take you up to a pretty decent peak because you got to challenge yourself in this one.
So, we kind of touched on this. It's been something, the VO2 max has been tested for many years or, decades even. But now it's peaking in popularity and it's a little bit more on the forefront from a longevity standpoint. So can you explain that correlation, how it evolved, or just it used to be more focused if you were training or you were just really focused on your endurance and cardiovascular, and now how it is, like you said, it's the biggest, factor, one of the best predictors all cause mortality.
A couple places I think that came out. One is since we've been testing this for so long, and there's these large data sets, especially now these really smart scientists being able to use different AI tools to manage this giant groups of data, can go in and use it to not just find, originally they were probably studying it to say, they're doing a test in the 70s and they're looking at athletes. Well, that person now, fast forward, is old, right? Like, given that, a lot of them have potentially passed away. So they were able to then follow people through, right, with these, robust for over time, and pull new correlations from old data, right? So they can take this stuff that's been out there to say, oh, wow, we tested people in the early 90s for this. And now let's go back 20 years later and see where they are. And then realizing that, oh, wow, this has changed, right? So some of it is just length of time we've been able to do it and these differences. Also starting to find, and this correlates to it, but other studies are looking at this. And it actually, because I don't know that I fully answered your question earlier, like why would someone want to do this or want to focus on it, is in order to optimize your VO2 max, in order to improve it a lot, one of the things you need to do is high intense exercise. So there's a benefit to low intensity, and I'm sure we'll talk about zones and low intensity and zone 2, which is also kind of a trend. But to optimally improve your VO2 max, you actually have to work pretty hard. And there's, again, a bunch of research showing that high intensity exercise also seems to be well correlated with longevity. So they start to, all these things kind of start to come together, that you realize that. And what do people tend to do as they age is they back off in things like intensity, whether it's just out of a fear of injury, whether it's I'm concerned that I shouldn't push my heart to this place, or all those things. So they're likely to not do it as much. And as they find it, now we're again starting to try to get this message out that no, in fact, in keeping this peak ability is one of the more important things you could do.
Well, and it's so interesting because Stephanie and I did a big endurance event last year, and it was zone 2, zone 2, zone 2. And I didn't know much about zone 2 training until that time. And that was really good because I was doing a lot of more high intensity workouts, a lot of HIIT workouts. But then there's the whole cortisol issue, right? And women and midlife. And it's like trying to manage it all. Your high cortisol levels aren't going to help your longevity either. But yet your HIIT training can increase the cortisol levels. So it's like, it gets overwhelming. But so then it's like, well, how much high intensity training do you need to move the needle on your VO2 max? You actually don't need that much from what I understand. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. I'm going to throw out a statement of, cortisol matters, but I actually think it's incredibly overstated in the concerns for most people, because what everyone does is take the edge case and it becomes normal. If you're going into the gym and you're doing incredibly high intensity work 6 days a week and you're not eating enough and your life is stressful and all these things are happening, oh yeah, you're going to break down, right? And it's going to be cortisol. It's also going to be impact and overuse and all these things, right? So there are absolute edge cases in which it matters, right? Or you just have incredibly stressful job in life and your body's haywire and these things are happening. But the human body is pretty good at hard exercise, right? Like it's meant to do it. It's meant to handle this stuff in certain amounts. So fearing intensity without a larger picture is a little bit where it gets overstated, right? Where as long as we are keeping it in place. So to actually answer your question as I get to it is if you look even across, I'm going to go performance for a second here because they're most focused. You look at some of the elite athletes out there, they've often got 2 workouts in a week, the really hard swings, right? Where they're going to say, all right, this one I'm going to go to the well a little bit. This one I'm going to work pretty hard. It's going to cost a little bit. And my other 4 to 5 are going to be pretty easy, right? And that seems, a lot of people will talk, there's a very popular 80-20 running is a really popular book in 80-20. So 20% of your time spent at these high intensities, 80% at the low. And for most people, practically that translates to 1 to 2 fairly high intensity workouts a week, right? Where we're doing some sort of HIIT interval, where we're doing like 4x4 is a really common VO2 max protocol, 4 minutes really hard, 4-minute recovery 4 times, 1 or 2. And then the rest of that being that more moderate base building type stuff is where most people should.
Well, it's so funny because you talked about the pendulum example earlier, and I feel like it's the same thing with the HIIT versus the zone 2, because I was crazy doing a lot of HIIT and really early in the morning, 5:30 workouts, 4 to 5 days a week. And I was not in a good place, right? And then I swung.
You're my edge case. I say cortisol mattered for you, right? That's a lot.
It did. And it was not good.
And I just want to throw a plug out that we actually can test cortisol. We have the capabilities to do that. If you're wondering, just find out. Let's just test your cortisol.
Do it. I actually have a test that my son, who's literally leaving to go back to college tomorrow. He's had it all summer, but you have to kind of be home all day. He's doing it today. You have to spit in a vial 4 times throughout the day.
Yeah. So
It's
you
pretty
can
crazy.
test your cortisol if you
Can
want.
be incredibly beneficial, right? I don't want someone to come out of this being like, oh, I can keep doing my fasted AM incredibly.
Right,
No,
right.
you're the person that should go test your cortisol and back off on
And it's high, and it's still high. I mean, it's still something I struggle with. Had I tested it back then, it would have been even crazier. I know it. So anyway, hit. And now the pendulum is swinging, and zone 2 is more popular. And like Marnie said, like we got really into the zone 2, and now it's like walking is kind of the new running, like more people are doing that. But to your point, if you're only doing sort of like bar, Pilates, yoga, and walking, is that really enough? And so it's getting back, and what is the balance? And so I like what you said. It's just 1 to 2 high intensity workouts a week. And it doesn't mean that you're running for 45 minutes at a high, like it doesn't need to be like super intense. You're taking these breaks, the 4x4.
What is that, a 32-minute workout? I mean,
usually a little bit of warm
right?
up and
Did
cool
I do
down
the
in
right
there.
math right on that?
I think so.
Yeah, because you're doing it 4 times, right? So
right,
and
8 times
usually
4.
Putting some warm
We
up.
can do math here, people.
Yeah. It's a little bit longer, but right where pendulums always go, I always think of like I'm actually the most boring moderate human on the planet because I just keep telling people like, yeah, that's good, but so is this. Like strength train, but probably do some cardio, do some easy, maybe do some hard. Like in the world of especially like high intensity exercise, right? So people will say all the time, oh, I'm doing HIIT, right? And then you look at the workout, and there's no rest periods. Like, actually, you're not, because there's no way your body can be at a high intensity for 45 plus minutes. You're actually moderate, just too long. High intensity is go really hard and then recover.
That's what I used to do. It was more like a zone 3, zone 4-ish workout. And I would just do it the whole time. And again, you're not accomplishing your goal.
That is about I would say I'm an exercise optimist. So I hate to talk negatively about exercise because if someone's doing something, I'm always, even in that world, I'm going to believe it's better than nothing, right? So my most like paralyzing fear in life is someone's going to listen to this podcast and come away and quit exercising because of something I said, right? In that world. But
that's not going to happen.
Yeah. If there is a worst, it would be that just 30 to 45 minutes of high zone 3, low zone 4, like that. Like, I can do it. It's miserable. It's burn. It's, no pain, no gain. It's probably the most counterproductive thing one could do from an exercise standpoint.
No, I was just going to say, like the traditional runner, the person that just runs, that doesn't have a gym membership, so they're not doing strength, and they're probably in zone 3 most of the time. Like a good runner.
I'm going to give you an example. This morning, I'm training for a half marathon right now. This morning, my girlfriend and I went on a 4-mile run. I got my stats when I got back from the run because I'm into Strava at the moment. And it told me that I was in zone 3 the entire run. Now we were just trying to do, like, it wasn't like we weren't trying to go super fast. We were just getting some mileage in, whatever. So now you're telling me that's like the worst thing I can do for myself. And I'm taking that in because that's the kind of person I am. How can I do this differently?
Okay, I've got a couple things. That was an awesome example. Please, one, keep it, because again, it's absolutely better than nothing. Running performance is different than longevity or health, right? So there are times that you want to do that when you're looking at improving that running output and some of those things. My first place I'm going to start with most people, though, is almost all of your traditional, your watch, Strava, whatever you're using is likely underestimating your zones. So people use age-predicted zones constantly, and it doesn't work for most people. This is where this gets confusing, right? Is heart rates are incredibly genetic. To say I have a higher or lower heart rate has nothing to do with fitness. It's a genetic thing. It's actually really predicated off the size of your heart, and you're talking about really small differences here, but in terms of what it needs to output. So customizing your zones. If you can go out and run with a friend and have a conversation while you're running, and you're not at that focused effort, mouth open, I'm starting to look for a way out, you're not in zone 3, right? Like that's you're likely in zone 2. You can speak. So
that's what we learned last year, Marnie, when we were doing the training.
Yeah, because we were chatting the whole run.
Yeah.
If you can turn and talk to somebody, you're good. That's where you should be training. If you look at definitions of what these things are and how they work, the hard part with zones, right, is it's not like an on-off switch. It's a gradual up and down, right, in terms of where you're getting. So if I've got a 10 beat range for a zone, the low end to the high end is different. When you're talking about high zone 3, you're starting to look for a way out, is the way I always like to think about it, right? I have to focus. I'm giving 1 to 2 word answers. Think about how you're going to feel in your 5K race and maybe a 10K race, and that feeling, that's zone 3.
Okay. And I actually had my lactate threshold tested last year, and I have the numbers and I have to put them in my phone because I actually haven't done that, which would be useful.
Go update. And if you've done a ton of zone-based training, even in that time, likely it's potentially time to update those things a little bit, because that is something that will improve over time, right? These aren't static numbers. That's a bummer answer, because it's much simpler to be like, oh, this is the heart rate that you always need to be at forever. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, thank you. Now it's, but mine shift depending on how I'm training. And I obviously have the capacity. I get tested all the time on different modalities and all these things. Like I play with these things constantly. But mine shift about 10 beats depending on if I'm training for a long endurance run, if I'm doing something real like spicy, like a Hyrox style race where it's going to hurt. My zone shift pretty significantly through the year.
Okay, can we take a quick side note and talk about this Hyrox thing? Because I see it all over online. Stephanie, have you seen that? It's like this big trend right now. Can you just take 2 minutes and tell us about it? And is it good for you, or is it just like this guy thing that's like, this guy's trying to outdo the next guy? Like,
It's probably better for women. I don't want to come off as sexist as I say anything like that, but like in that, getting that intensity and getting some of those things. So before I recorded this, I tend to have a tendency to ramble. Hold me to 2 minutes here. But so Hyrox is let's call it a style of hybrid race. Hybrid racing is this idea of taking running and some sort of strength training or high intensity things and smushing them together. This one specifically is 8,000 meter runs. So it ends up being 5 total miles of running, but you do 1,000 meters and then you do a different activity. Row, ski, those are already out of order. Farmers carry with kettlebells, push and pull a sled, lunges, wall balls, burpees. I'm missing a couple, but so you have basically these runs that take somewhere between 4 to 8 minutes, depending on how fast you are, with a higher intensity station in the middle. And super popular because most people don't want to sit on one side or the other, right? You talk to most people and you look at a marathon, you're like, maybe I want to carry more muscle. I've heard that's more important. I don't just want to focus there. Talk to people only strength trainers, like heart health is important. I want to have a little bit of both. So there's all these sort of hybrid things that are trying to smush them together, right? Where the really good runner is going to get to a heavy sled and not be able to push it. The really strong guy is going to go to push that sled and then just, die as he goes around the lap. So that's where they've come in. That's where it's gotten really popular and it's really blown up because people like this idea of kind of having it all and balancing their fitness, right?
Are you loving this conversation and want even more ways to live your happiest, healthiest, and most authentic life? Then we'd love for you to join our growing community on Substack. When you subscribe, you'll get bonus content and behind-the-scenes insights from us. Plus, you'll be the first to know about our upcoming programs and events. Your support helps us keep bringing inspiring guests and impactful conversations straight to you each week. So head to the link in our show notes, sign up today, and let's continue this journey together to create the art of living well. Okay, so I have seen this, and it reminds me of a place I used to work out at that we did all this kind of stuff. But does Lifetime offer like a program like this, or?
It's a contest, isn't it?
Yeah, so Hyrox is a contest. It's
and
they're a company. They've done a great job of scaling this thing. It's across the world. Places will do sims and stuff, but we actually have a thing called LT Games. It's really new. Our first, actually yesterday was a contest shoot getting ready for our first competition is going to be October 21st to 28th. I feel really bad. I don't remember that number off the top of my head. Early October. Right now, we're keeping it fairly limited. So if you're here locally in Minnesota, our Target Center location offers classes for it. It's only at these locations because it's a little bit higher intensity, a little bit harder. Obviously, at all our locations, we have classes that can help you get good at this stuff. But this one is specifically, and it's our competition style version of this, right? Where it has running and skiing. We believe that even something like a Hyrox doesn't necessarily value strength training enough. So if you look at ours, there's some heavier deadlifts in it. And we've taken an approach where you can actually choose your weight a little bit, but the heavier you go, the lower reps you have to do to kind of reward people who are stronger, but put a little more strength emphasis in ours, but around the same time frame. We're talking about our really elite people are 45, 50 minutes. The longer duration stuff might take you 75, 80, 90 minutes to go. But again, these things are really popular. And the hope with a lot of this stuff is it settles that pendulum in a better place, right? I can't just be a runner. I can't just be strong. I can't just do low intensity. I can't, I got to do a little bit of everything to be good at this stuff.
That's super interesting, though. I feel like I have seen it a bit.
It's all now that your
do.
phone is listening to you, probably you're going to see it.
It'll pop
over.
up.
Yeah,
but I do
really
I'm like super intrigued by this because it has everything. Because I don't like doing one thing for a long period of time, except maybe hiking. That would be the only activity. So, okay. Okay, so can we talk a little bit about, we mentioned like the mask and how lifetime, like your technology is changing, but how does someone get tested if they're like, oh, I really want to go get my VO2 max tested? Where do they go? What does it look like? Just maybe explain it a little bit.
Yeah. So traditionally, if I say, hey, I want to know these numbers, or as zones are probably off, right? The best way to calibrate this stuff is to do an actual test. And so what that's going to look like is you're going to be wearing a mask no matter what, because what that mask is doing is it's capturing the oxygen coming in, carbon dioxide going out. And oxygen in, right, the more I'm consuming, that's what's measuring that VO2 max. It's also telling me things like caloric burn, et cetera, as I'm going. And how a test traditionally works is it's ramp based. So you start at a warm up, and then over time, over kind of 1 to 2 minute stages, it's just going to bring you up over time to get you to your peak. So as you keep going, more oxygen to come out. The byproduct of exercise, you're exhaling more carbon dioxide, which is getting waste product out of your body. And that's telling us sort of what fuel you're using, and these kind of very important sciencey metrics here, either lactate threshold or what's often called VT or ventilatory threshold. And those are what's dictating your zones, right? So as we're doing a test like this, we're able to measure that peak, that VO2, and then we're able to measure these very specific markers called VT1, VT2, LT1, LT2, whatever, aerobic base, anaerobic threshold. And those are how we can start to dictate what these zones are. Okay? So we're going to do that in a test. I would say depending on where you live here, at about 50% of our lifetime locations, we do have testing available. It will be 100% again. It always has been. We're just in a hardware changeover. There are some, I hate competitor here, but if you're not proximal to a lifetime or not a member, you do have to be a member to engage. There are some external companies doing this. So if you Google something like a VO2 max test or, like a metabolic assessment, there's some external companies doing it. A lot of times, actually a great spot to go is to contact, if you've got schools with a decent exercise science program around you, which there is actually a bunch here in the cities, you can actually often get it relatively cheap because students.
Yeah, the University of Minnesota does the testing, actually. I used an external company for myself. I didn't want to drive to the U. That's the only reason I didn't go. But
if there's a program, they probably do it. Students need, reps and practice. And again, most of the time students only do stuff on other students. So to get people of, different fitness abilities and age, demographically, it's studies forever have been very difficult to use because you're like, oh, we're using a group of 22-year-old guys again, because that's who's in an exercise science program at a local university. That's your absolute gold standard. Right, is that's going to actively measure VO2. It's going to really be able to do things like calibrate those zones and get you training correctly, because it can actually look at things like our fuel use, right? So how much fat am I using versus carbon dioxide, which just dictates the intensity of the exercise, right? Or how much actually like stress or cortisol is my, body handling for this activity, is all going to come through something like that. You can also, though, if you're like, there's nowhere around me, the idea of putting a mask on is absolute no to me, or I'm just not ready to commit. There's a lot of ways to estimate these things, right? So if you, depending on fitness level, if you're doing something called a Cooper test, it's a 12 minutes. I should really know this off the top of my head.
Yeah. One of our other guests talked about this. I'm blanking on the parameters of it, but.
Yeah. So Cooper test, 1.5 mile run, Rockport walk, if you're a little less fit. Like there's a bunch of these different things you can do to estimate some of these things, right? And even within those, obviously, once you have a max heart rate, a thing I encourage people to do, put a pause on here, please talk to your doctor if you have any health conditions, right? Get cleared before you do something like this, is to do some sort of maximal effort test at some point. Get an idea of what your max heart rate is, because again, your wearable is underestimating it because it's trying not to kill you. But just simply going into your wearable and adjusting your max heart rate could be a really big game changer for a lot of people and getting those things more accurate.
So I have a question about that. Like, I think about myself when I push myself on the treadmill really, really hard, like let's say 1 minute all out. Peloton likes, let's do an all out sprint for 1 minute or whatever. So I struggle to know where the top is. Like, how do you, I don't want to run where my heart rate is so high I could die. How to know when you're at that max? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I wish there was a cleaner answer to this. If I'm taking a person who's healthy and doesn't have any pre-existing heart conditions or things that they don't know about, likely can push significantly harder than they think they can.
Yeah. And so I don't think I ever do, because first of all, it's uncomfortable.
That's what it is. I remember doing that lactate testing and I was like,
oh. Your limiter on a treadmill is, unless you're a very unique human who has some ability to, go to another place, is going to be the fear of falling off that treadmill. The speed up process and all those things. We have some put at Lifetime. A lot of places have these now, but we have these manually powered treadmills that you run on. And it takes a little bit to get used to it. It's an odd thing. It's not the same as running on a treadmill. It's a little bit different. But people will like, my heart rate's way different on this. It's because you're not like, you're controlling it a little bit differently. So your ability to push a little harder is there. If I'm trying to find a max, a quick sprint isn't the way to do it. You want to ramp up over time, because the faster up you go, the less heart rate works well. So if I'm doing like real sprint stuff, like I'm even going to a track and I'm going to do hundreds, your heart rate's going to lag. You're going to finish and you're going to look down and be like, oh, my heart rate's not that high. And then over the next 20 to 30 seconds, it's going to come up, right? Because heart rate isn't perfectly correlated. It comes up kind of at a different time. The slower or steadier you increase, the better your heart rate's going to correlate. So a long run works super well because there isn't these peaks and valleys. But so to measure something like this, if I'm trying to see like what's the high I can get on a treadmill over the course of 15 to 20 minutes, get to where I'm starting to just I'm getting concerned I can't keep going, and look down, and that's going to be a good indicator of what that max heart rate's going to be. When you sprint, it's going to be like, your goal is to give it, right?
And I remember doing it, and that's why it's nice to have someone with you, like a coach or a trainer, obviously, that's facilitating it, because they can kind of gauge like, okay, you can do this, you can go more, and they'll push you. Versus if I was doing it on my own, I'd be like, oh, I'm dying. I'm going to slow down.
Can be, especially if you're a little competitive, sign up for a 5K, talk some trash to somebody, so you got to run it a little faster than you want. But you're outside, there's people around, there's all these things happening. I did a 6.5 mile trail race here in Minnesota last year. It was called a half, and I did math wrong on what half of a half marathon is. So in my head, it was 6 miles, and it's 6.5 miles. And so I did like, I'm feeling good, I'm going to kick at the end here. And I got to 6.
And then you had another half mile.
And realized, oh no, I've made a grave mistake. And I had a choice to make. It was like, do I waste the kind of kick and the work I've done here to kind of walk it in because I'm dying? Or do I just hold on and see what happens? And the answer is like, of course, and now because I'm getting closer to where there's humans and people and the finish, so I'm like, well, I gotta just hold on, and ended up running probably one of the fastest miles I've put in a very long time. Saw heart rates that are pretty high, and you kind of come out like, well, I didn't die. I don't want to be there a lot. It took me a while to come down, but you surprise yourself in those moments. So I actually like some of that stuff for that reason, right? Get in an environment.
Sorry, one question I've had is, do you have to run? For someone out there that's not a runner, can you go on a treadmill at a super high incline and just play with the incline and the pace to do some of this testing? Yeah. Like if you're doing your own or doing like the 4x4, right? You don't have to run.
We do plenty of VO2 max tests with an incline walk. You're going to run out at some point as you get fitter. Like there's a muscular demand as incline comes up. So when you start to get above 12 to 15% incline, there's so much muscular demand that you'll start to show honestly worse than you are from it's no longer your cardiovascular system. It's your muscular system's ability to kind of keep getting up that thing. And again, there's a point in which you almost have to start running because of pace. But if you're new, we're not talking go run. You could absolutely incline walk. In fact, most people, that's the zone 2 I'll prescribe is incline walk. Most people can't go run in zone 2, right? You got to get to a level of fitness to do that well. And then there's a whole host of other modalities. If you're doing something like a 4x4, you want to work really hard. I'm a massive fan of other modalities. A rower, like an air bike, one of the bikes with the big fan in the middle that you see like arms and legs, miserable in a good way, right? Low impact, no skill associated with it. Because it's arms and legs and you're powering it, that's another place that you can go. So things like that work really, 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 really well. My one sort of caveat to all of this is there's also been this popularity of maybe using, strength training movements as your cardio intervals and those things. And it honestly doesn't work as well as people might like to think it does. Even though you're seeing a high heart rate response, that's an activity where heart rate and cardiac output or actual oxygen consumption start to decouple a little bit. And you're going to see higher heart rates. You're not going to get quite the blood flow, or it's called venous return in that, because of the tension associated with a movement like that. So if you're really trying to improve VO2 max, if you're really trying to improve your zone 2, it should be something fairly cyclical in nature that you can do for a while in that world, rather than those kind of quicker movements.
How often do you think a person should test their VO2 max?
If you're talking pure longevity, I don't really care about performance at all. I would put that in my sort of yearly checkup category, year to maybe 6 months, but for sure, no need to go more than that. The longer you've trained, the less your VO2 max is going to change in a good way, right? As you start to hit a ceiling, there's a genetic component here we probably should throw out. Like, everyone can get good at this, and everyone can get high enough that they're in the like low risk for, mortality and those things. But they have these monstrous engines that they're hitting VO2 numbers that are unfathomable to me, right? Nothing I'm going to
What
do.
would that be? Like, can you give us an
Yeah.
example of like
So-
some ranges, or is it too person dependent?
It's really age and gender dependent, but I can give some variables.
Can you
right?
give
So-
us some general ranges?
Yep. So if I want a really good VO2 max, if I want like a very good, and we'll start, if I'm a female, older you get, because there is traditionally a bit of a decline here over time, right? With those things. But we're starting to see that has more to do with people's life choices than it does actual changes in aging, so the decline can be significantly smaller than we think. But really, female.
How about a
you're
50-year-old?
Yeah. So 50-year-old female, if you're in the 40s, so 40 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute, you're in a pretty like good category, right? On a chart that's going to show as elite. If you're talking somebody who's still smashing records in a marathon or those things, they're probably 55, 60. No, not that high at that point anymore, but 50. So anywhere, if you're 35, 40, 45 as that number, you're doing pretty good in those categories. Male, it's going to be just a little bit higher than that. You're talking, more like 42, 45 in that range. You're talking older. As you go younger, a little bit better. It's probably want to think target that 50-ish number to be in those elite categories. But then again, if you look at elite cyclists, cross-country ski runners have the highest. You're talking 65, 70, like unfathomably huge numbers.
Cross-country ski runner. Interesting.
That's on my list of things to do as an empty nester, which I'll be in a week. Actually, in like 4 days, I'm going to learn how to cross-country ski.
Not in Minnesota, you're not, Marnie.
Yeah, I am.
I meant in 4 or 5 days. I'm joking. Like we're in summer, and I don't want to think about snow.
No,
so
no,
It
no.
could
But
start, you never know.
no,
let's not talk
no.
about that right now.
Eventually.
Yeah. I love cross-country skiing is a phenomenal type of exercise. Great for a lot of people. It's actually what got me to run, because it was just more fun and interesting. And I started doing it, built some aerobic base, and found myself like looking for that replacement in the summer, and accidentally stumbled into becoming a runner, all because of cross-country skiing.
So can we shift a little bit? I know we mentioned zone training, and I think that's another thing that's really important. And so a lot of people are focused on that if they have an Apple Watch or whatever tracker they're using. But even for someone that doesn't have a device, how can you figure out what zone you're in? And we talked about zone 3 as being maybe not something we want to be in for long periods of time, but can you just break down the zones in really a simple, kind of easy to understand way?
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk about a 5-zone formula. And if you Google this, there are 3-zone, there are 5-zone, there are 4. So there's different, schools of thought here, right? And I want to say that because in case someone is used to a 3-zone and they get confused, they're all good and they're all possible. I just think 5 zones is more descriptive of what's happening. Sometimes get it. So zone 1 is your easiest. We often think of that as your recovery or warm up, cool down kind of pace as we get into it. Isn't, though, as we sit here, we're not in zone 1. If I go for a walk, I want to be careful if I say this, because depending on fitness level, it could get you into zone 1. But if you are actively exercising and training, going for a walk, getting some zone, you're not working hard enough to be in a zone. That's just movement. Great for you, incredibly important, but it's not cardiovascular nature. So it is.
Even if you're wearing a weighted vest?
Oh man, I knew weighted vest was going to come up. Even if you're,
Because I notice my heart rate does go higher when I'm wearing my weighted vest.
most of that has nothing to do. If you were to actively be measuring your oxygen consumption with or without, it would go up a little bit, but not as much as your heart rate is. That has more to do with mechanical stress and some other things. That vest pushing on your rib cage, on your thorax, is decreasing how well you consume oxygen, so it is limiting it slightly. It is an incredibly good thing to do. I'm not talking trash about weight vest walking. It's like axial loading is amazing. It can actually help with posture, because if you're hunched over with a weight vest, you're going to feel it. Yeah. There's so many reasons to do it. Cardiovascular ability is not one of them. So
Okay.
It just doesn't challenge that system. It's a muscular demand, not an oxygen demand. Even when we talk zone 1, we are talking about moving a little bit harder than we would be just, walking to and from a parking lot, those things. So you move into zone 2, that's your long endurance or aerobic zone, potentially called something like a fat burn zone. That's the fuel we're predominantly using at that point. I can be in zone 2. Theoretically, I could be in zone 2 forever. My body would give out my ability if I could intake enough fuel and water and those types of things. Zone 3 then often is considered like a high aerobic development zone or a threshold zone, because what's happening is I'm still aerobic, and I'll define that in just a second as we get into it, but I'm still predominantly using oxygen for fuel, but I'm starting to work harder. And what's happening as I work harder is my body has to use more sugar or carbohydrate to fuel my muscles. I can either be using fat. Fat's an awesome fuel, but it's slow. I get out of it is a little bit less. So as I go to higher intensity exercises, I need to start consuming sugar. So I'm just starting to use a little more sugar than I am fat. So one of the problems with sugar as a fuel is there's more waste product buildup. So that burning sensation you feel in your muscles is a byproduct of sugar metabolism, or called glycogen in your muscles if you want. The top of your zone 3 is this thing that we call your anaerobic threshold. And your anaerobic threshold is when your body is switching from being predominantly aerobic or using oxygen to anaerobic, or anaerobic means without oxygen. So as I cross that threshold, it's called this crossover effect. You're actually seeing it on a graph if you're doing this test. Is I'm producing more carbon dioxide than I have oxygen coming in, and my waste product buildup is happening faster than I can get rid of it. So when I get above my threshold, what I'm saying is at some point I'm going to have to slow down because there's going to be too much of this waste product buildup. I'm looking for a way out. So that's what we get into. The threshold would be this idea of zone 4. How long you can be there depends on genetics, training, all those things. I'm really good at holding on to those areas. I can get about 30 to 35 minutes in that world. I'm miserable afterwards and during, but I can sit there for a while. Some people, it's more like 5 to 8 minutes. And then your zone 5 is your absolute peak, all out, up to that sort of threshold, right? That's your very low, I don't have a lot of time here. I'm going up to that peak, right? So that's walking through these zones.
I don't really get the difference between zone 4 and zone 5, because if you're looking for a way out and you're feeling terrible in zone 4, like zone 5 is just another level of that, basically. Or
that's why a lot of people have moved to 3 zones, smush zone 1 and 2 together and smushed 4 and 5 together, because it is not that distinction. The longer you go, like zone 4 is something like, if I was to, again, we're going to go performance terms here, but if I'm doing a 2 mile, maybe 3, again, depending on your fitness, it's like, that's where you're going to be that whole time. It's really hard. It's really miserable. My heart rate is, kind of pounding through the roof, but I know I can hold on here for a little bit more. Zone 5 is going to be more like your Peloton go. And the hard part with zone 5 is that you're often in and out so fast that your heart rate doesn't track it well. Right?
Yeah, because it's
I'm
like
in
30 seconds or whatever.
I'm in the zone, but my heart rate barely catches up. But it's those all out 2 minutes or less type of efforts, and then we're coming down.
Like I'm picturing you're watching the finish line and you want to push and you're just going to give it your all out.
Yeah, that's what I'm emptying the tank. Right. I don't have much left there.
You know the end is in sight, and so you can give it your all.
Yeah, but practically there's not that much difference, right? Understanding the difference between those. It's above threshold. It's getting real nasty. You're, again, driving this idea of sugar as fuel, a lot of burning sensation, those things.
So I have a question about the zone. I think this relates to the zones, but okay, you hear the term bonking, right? So I'm just going to throw the term out there. And then my son is doing a Olympic triathlon actually this weekend in Chicago that he's been training for all summer. And this is his first big endurance event. And he went out a couple weeks ago and did a swim bike run, like basically a what's it called when you stack them together? I'm forgetting the word. A brick. At the end, he felt horrible. He was throwing up in his apartment or whatever, like in the dark. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this story. Just like for a couple hours, basically recovering. And then I was kind of talking it through with him. I'm like, well, did you fuel properly? And did you, the electrolytes? And I was kind of going through all the stuff that I know. And, it turns out he was out the night before. He didn't get a good sleep. I mean, the kid's 24, right? Like he's whatever. But I'm just curious. Part of me wonders if he was in zone 4 and zone 5 for too much of that time, or what would cause him to experience that. And would you consider that bonking?
Bonking, there's a couple things that people might consider bonking. start here. You're probably right. He's probably working too hard, too long. Again, the stress of that, the metabolic byproducts associated. So the harder you work, the easiest way I can describe this, the harder you're working, the more waste product that's created. And waste product is actually, if somebody out there is a real like exercise science geek, it's not technically a waste product. It's very useful for the body. But for our purpose, we're going to call it a waste product. And the more of that you create, the worse you're often going to feel, and the longer it takes you to get rid of it, right? But so real classic bonking in its most useful sense is your body has about 2 hours worth of stored glycogen or stored sugar called glycogen in your body. You've got about 2 hours worth. Everybody does. It's in your muscles and it's in your liver. So if you're working at an intensity that's burning that fuel source, that's using sugar, and you're not replacing it, and you're out, when you're out, you're out. And at that point, you can only use fat as fuel because you have plenty of that. Everybody does not matter leanness, right? We got tons of extra fat. And so you're basically going to have to walk it in wherever you're at. And you can start to intake more fuel, but to replenish glycogen and take that fuel once you're low is you're almost done. And so a real true bonk is that. What also sometimes happens though, is again, if I'm working a little bit too hard and I'm pushing too hard and I get to this place where I have all this waste product buildup and my body says, you got to stop, you got to slow down. A lot of people hit that. But in that world, I'd say I have been maybe intaking some fuel or those things. It's once I start to exhale a little bit and I get rid of that waste product, if I can start again, it's not really bonking. I can start the activity again because I still have fuel available. I just couldn't use it because I had to get to a lower intensity.
That makes sense, Marnie, when we had all these trainers tell us that every hour when you're doing a long workout, you should be fueling after 60 minutes because you don't want to get close to the point where you're going to bonk, right?
That's another world where you're, again, seeing that is, I think I actually, both of you mentioned some, the HIIT classes and especially morning, one of the things that can really counteract cortisol is fueling. So being in a low fuel state is very bad for stress. And again, that came from a place of, there was this theoretical thought that being fasted would burn more fat, and it doesn't matter. It decreases performance. And so at anything remotely close to intensity, fueling and using some carbohydrate for fuel can, one, get you to work a lot harder, but actually two, it will really stave off things like cortisol response because you're giving your body the fuel it needs to do it. And fuel, and this could be a whole separate podcast, we don't have to get into it, this is much more high performance, is getting wildly popular right now. When you look at elite cyclists and triathletes are doing like 120 to 150 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So in the Tour de France this year,
Isn't that what we were told?
No, not that. We were doing like 30-ish.
7.
So think, so 150 to 200 grams
I'm
of
thinking
carbohydrate. You're thinking
calories.
I'm thinking calories.
This is 4x that. This is 500 to 600. This is doing, if you think like goo packets, this is doing a goo every 15 minutes because those are about 20. And they're using, these like high calorie mixes and all these things. But, and again, most people shouldn't be doing that. But we're talking like these elite level athletes and these really long events are putting absurd amounts of fuel in because it's powering their performance and they're feeling better and performing better and being able to do all these crazy things. So fueling can very well stave off some of these issues.
So for the normal person listening to this podcast, like what is your favorite way to tell people to fuel before a HIIT class or before some sort of workout?
There's a huge tolerance factor to this.
Yeah.
Like what you can do. But if I'm doing anything higher intensity, I'm going to a HIIT class or involves pushing to these things, you do want some sort of carbohydrate in your system. It's just going to be used as a better fuel. For most people, if they can, getting a meal in around 45 minutes before, and a meal, I say, lightly around that, something like, for me, an early morning workout, because that's when I work out, is I use like Bobo brand granola bars. They have these things like a Bobo. It sits well for me. It's easy to digest, sits really well. 30 to 45 minutes before my run, I'm just eating that with some coffee. But having something in your system, there are some liquid fuel options that work really well for people. We've always been a really big fan of a thing called UCAN. It's a carbohydrate mix, but it's a little bit slower digesting, a little bit lower glycemic response. That can work well for some people. And then as you really start to push the performance side of it, like if that's your goal and you're talking, I want to run, I want to do that try, you're going to have to move to some sort of liquid fuel, and you're going to have to start to get, like, for a lot of people, it's very difficult to, if you've been in a world of, diet culture or sugar is the enemy, like pounding 45 grams of very basic sugars right before you go run feels weird.
Yeah.
But man, does it work really well.
But it works.
It
I
works
mean,
really well.
we experienced
I
that
know,
stuff.
I know,
and
we
it
did.
does
And
work.
the important thing to remember there is if you're doing it during activity or right before and during, the best thing in the world to stave off something like a insulin spike or glucose response is movement. Your body's using it at that time.
Right.
And all the harmful things you've thought about with sugar and all those things are not really happening because you're using it when it's supposed to be used. It's just
like the potato
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
that like I would
The
never
French
put in my
fries.
body. And
Yeah.
It's
the
the
stuff.
8 p.m. I'm on my couch. That's where that stuff becomes
exactly.
problematic,
Yes,
right?
I
When we're
know,
doing it at during the run or before it, there's some great.
It was definitely a bit of a mindset shift for
Mhm.
Marnie and I. Will say that.
I have had that too, and I laugh about it all the time because I come from like kind of a strength sport background, trying to build muscle, trying to eat a ton, but still the concept of like I'm just gonna chug a bunch of sugar is like how many people I've yelled at for this, like really embracing it. It's like, oh wow. One of the areas actually that my biggest issue was mental clarity at work. Because I work out in the morning, I would do these hard efforts, and without realizing it, I was kind of dragging through the day and going to caffeine. And I started bumping up my carb intake, and especially during a workout. And I was like, I'm so much more productive in the day. I need so much less caffeine. My mental clarity is better because I'm just recovered from it.
Okay, I know we need to start to wrap up this conversation, and Danny, you may need to come back on, but you just said something. You said recovery, and maybe just a couple minutes on recovery, because that is something that for those people out there that are working out pretty hard and they're busy, we have a lot of busy moms on this and dads that listen, the recovery piece sometimes, and I'll speak for myself, tends to sort of get fallen off when you run out of time.
It's very important. I'm going to start. We might just have to have another conversation.
We should have a conversation on recovery.
My official title and role with Life Director of Performance and Recovery. So we've been talking about performance, so we can flip over and spend this much time on recovery and what we can do and what it means, but it matters a lot. And the interesting thing is most people start to dismiss something like recovery as, oh, I'm not an elite athlete, so it doesn't matter. If I'm a 25-year-old elite athlete, I don't have anything else in my life. And I don't say that, negatively, but you looked at like, if that's your job, well, yeah, think back to college, I'm going to do this workout and I'm going to hang out, I'm going to rest and whatever. If I take a person that's like, okay, my job is relatively stressful, or I've got a high demand job, I've got traffic as a stressor, I've got kids or life as a stressor, and then I'm going to put training in that as well. Actually, that's the person that needs to be really focused on this so that it doesn't start to negatively impact your life. And I'll just give my very fast plug to nutrition, ensuring you have enough food, enough nutrients to fuel and supply your body and rebuild from those things is going to be huge. It's going to be your stress. It's going to be your sleep. Let's start there. How well you sleep is, I don't care how much time you're foam rolling or or whatever, sleep matters quite a bit. And then it's your overall stress levels, your stress management system. And I say that because oftentimes we can't get rid of it. Probably aren't going to give the kids away, probably aren't going to quit the job. Those things would be very counterproductive. But
that would cause more stress.
Yeah, right. There's a totally different side of it. But if I can mitigate in some way through breathing drill, just having something, and actually sometimes where all these things cross over is often the exercise is the stress mitigating thing in there. The last one I'd put in there, which is a little more, is your actual training volume. And there are people that I have talked to that you just had to say like, this probably isn't for you right now. With where your life is, with what's going on, I don't know that putting more on it is going to be productive in any way. Let's wait for a period of time in which you can maybe free up a little bit of things. And then there's a million other things you can do that can also help those things and help sleep and do all those things. But that's like the quick version.
Yeah, no, that's great. And those are foundational principles that Marnie and I talk about all the time, especially the sleep, obviously the nutrition, and just getting movement in it. This was a great topic to dive into, but depending on where you're at, like Danny said, you may not, just walking and getting 10,000 steps a day for right now, based on the other stressors in your life and focusing on sleep, maybe exactly where you're at and what you need to focus on, right?
I've had a few clients that I can think of through my time as a trainer that because of things like job stress, is important to something like VO2 max. Is this gets back to the edge cases that I talked a little trash about cortisol at the beginning, right? Or those things, but it was like, hey, we're going to do 2 30-minute strength workouts because there's some big advantage there. It actually can have some positive health benefit, even to stress and some of those things. We're going to do 2 30-minuters a week spread out, and then you're going to move a lot. And that's all we're going to do right now, because more than that is a problem for you. And someone can often start to feel way better at that point.
And it's very individual. I mean, you really need to, for all you listeners out there, you have to focus on your own body and your needs and what's going on in your life right now. And what's happening today may not be what's happening 6 months from now. So you can make a change at that point.
And that's where I'll just put a plug in for our health transformation audit. Sometimes people are just stuck and they don't really know what to do because they're so consumed by what others are doing. Social media, the podcast, all the things that are really important, interesting for a lot of people. If you have a lot going on in your life, maybe you need to dial it back, or maybe you need to ramp it up. So come on our show. We can dive into what's holding you back. You're going to walk away with tangible action steps and, kind of help you bridge the gap between where you are now and where you truly want to be. And you can find a link in our show notes or email us to sign up.
Great. And Danny, as we wrap up this conversation, we would love to leave our listeners with a couple actionable, tangible steps that they could do. Maybe there's a couple things you could suggest. They may be lifetime members. They may not be lifetime members. So maybe you're a beginner. Maybe you're in midlife. Any thoughts here?
Yeah. So if I take all of what we've talked about, which I take away, I'm going to start with calibrate your zones in some way. Come to Lifetime, get a test done, go somewhere else, get a test done. Just get on a treadmill in your basement and understand, right? Again, if I Google ramp test, if I Google anaerobic threshold testing, like you could find something that's going to walk you through it. Calibrate your intensity in some way so that you're not relying on your smartwatch, your thought, your feeling, those things that they're not going to be great. Calibrate it. And then my second thing in there is vary your intensity. Right? We talked about at the beginning, take 1 to 2 workouts a week that are going to be a little harder, that are going to be that tougher, that higher intensity work. That's going to do worlds of improvement to your VO2 max, to your health, your ability to continue moving and feeling good through long life. And then ensure you get a couple easier, lower intensity workouts in per week because of all the potential benefit of that is going to be. So if you walk in and you calibrate where you're at, you get a couple hard ones and you can resist the pendulum of all these different things, you're going to be in a great spot.
So we just want to share where people can find you or just, Lifetime if they're interested. There are locations across the country, not just in Minnesota.
Yep, absolutely. Locations across the country. If you're not proximal to Lifetime or you're not currently a member, one of the first things I would encourage you to do is download our digital app. If you just go to Lifetime Digital in the App Store, it is free. You do not have to be a member. There's an incredible amount of content there. So a bunch of Lifetime podcasts, of which I have been a part of. Jamie, who's been on your podcast before, obviously is lead there and does some great work. So there's all sorts of things on there. There's an incredible amount of workouts. We've just launched an AI engine on there. Again, this could be a whole conversation, but that is calibrated off of our experts to give you better advice than just blank Google or ChatGPT would. So the first place I tell people to go is to that Lifetime app. You can always follow either Lifetime on social media or specifically if you want a little more fitness related info, our trainers account. So it's just simply, if you were to Google Lifetime Trainers on Instagram, you would find that account. Tons and tons of great stuff there as you're able to get into it. I have a personal Instagram as well. It's mostly just pictures of my dog. I've been told I should probably have a better. You can feel free to follow if you want to see my 14-week-old puppy right now.
Oh, what kind of puppy?
Yeah.
It's incredibly mixed breed. It's like Chihuahua, Pit Bull, German
what's
Shepherd,
his or her
Poodle.
name?
Her name is Zara.
Zara.
Oh,
She's
cute.
got real big ears, really long legs, looks like a kangaroo.
Cute.
I'm absolutely obsessed right now.
So, Danny, what does the art of living well mean to you?
My tagline, and it fits perfectly here, has always been that my goal is to be the ultimate generalist. I want to be just as good at everything as I possibly can to be able to say, sure, I'd love to try that, or I'd love to do that, and be no longer than 8 to 12 weeks from being able to do it. And so to me, that just absolute generalist attitude has just done wonders for my overall wellness in trying to balance things out. So I'm just going to take my sort of general philosophy on it. Seems to hit very well in that world.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Oh, well, thank you. Well, you will for sure have to come back on and talk about a few things that you touched on briefly today for a part 2, including recovery. But until then, thank you so much for coming on our show.
I learned a lot.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Living Well podcast. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It helps more people discover our show.
And if you're ready to take your health and happiness to the next level, we would love to support you. Whether it's through our transformative group programs, personalized coaching, or functional medicine lab testing, we help uncover the root causes of your health challenges and unlock your vitality.
Visit www.theartoflivingwell.us to learn more and book a free discovery call. Until next time, keep creating your art of living well.